Alles wat om 'n hele reistrek te behartig was daar. En die mense is besig om hulle af te brand. Hulle het een van my waterlorries afgebrand, een van die trekkers afgebrand, al my quadbikes wat daar was afgebrand. VIP losies, community halls, gone, toilets, gone. Ons praat hier daaroor.
My guest is the 2025 winner of the Free South Africa, Free SA Young Leaders Award in the media category, Joe Emilio. Free SA is the Foundation for Rights of Expression and Equality. Joe Emilio is also the founder and the host of Newsflash, a growing YouTube news platform. And he is, and that's why he's here today, the creator, the producer, the director of Stolen Ground, a documentary uncovering the violent land invasion that destroyed the Tygerberg Raceway in Kraaifontein in July 2020, and the silent epidemic of land grabs spreading across South Africa. Stolen Ground premiered last night on YouTube. Land grabs is a huge theme in South Africa, and that's why I've invited Joe. Joe, it's great to meet you. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Johan. Thank you so much for having me. I'm a huge fan of your program. I watch it almost every week or every time you release something. So it's a great honor to be on the show.
That's very kind of you. Thank you very much. I'm an old, I call myself a has-been. So I'm really the old guy who's just doing it for fun here. But congratulations on this documentary. I watched it last night as it went out, the premiere last night. What a fantastic documentary you put together. I must congratulate you on that. What was it like last night for you?
First of all, thank you. Thank you so much for the very kind words. Coming from someone such as yourself that's been in the broadcasting industry for many years, that's a huge compliment. So thank you. And last night was interesting to say the least. I think, when I woke up, obviously Sunday morning, I was very excited. And as the countdown started and, the hours grew closer and closer, I started to get very nervous. I'm also a comedian. I do as a bit of a hobby, stand up and stuff. I've been doing it for many years. And it felt like I was doing my one-man show. It felt like I had like those stage jitters leading up to the premiere. And I was thoroughly happy, excited, and blown away by the response during and after the premiere. It did exactly what I hoped it would. It made people emotional. It made people angry. It made people sad for Chris, the previous owner of the racetrack, which was really the emotional and the heart of the documentary. It really circles around what he lost.
Yeah.
And then the certain events after the land grab that just, he was basically against the world, and he lost everything. And
Yep.
I hope that people realize that there's a lot of land grabs that do happen around Cape Town in South Africa, and sometimes it's a nature reserve, or it's a random piece of plot of land that nobody's doing anything with. But when it's something that someone's built for nearly 30 years, a racetrack has built a community around that. Hundreds, if not thousands, of people have raced in those racetracks. He's given a platform and an opportunity for young racers to grow into these spectacular racers down the road, who go to circuit or they stay with oval track, but either way they become champions. He really helped the motor industry quite a lot, and for this whole thing to just be taken and destroyed and nothing left, and no help whatsoever from anyone, it's a travesty. And I made the documentary because I had a curiosity in why there are so many land grabs happening, and how is it so easy for it to happen, and why the government isn't doing anything. Those were answered in the documentary. And I started with the Tygerberg Raceway because it's actually quite close to where I live. It's about 15, 20 minutes away.
It's just,
And two,
outside of Cape Town, is it not? Something like
yes,
30
yeah,
kilometers
it's about,
outside.
yes,
Yep.
30 kilometers outside of Cape
Yeah.
Town. And yeah, so I chose the racetrack because, like I said, it's close to me. I could use resources within my means to find out what exactly happened. And at the time, when it did happen, it was big news. And also a lot of the times when, especially now with Cyril and the whole Trump meeting in the Oval Office, and Cyril saying there's no land grabs happening, you know, he's playing semantics. But I felt that now would be a good time to investigate this kind of situation about land grabs. And my ultimate curiosity was just about, okay, how did this happen? How was this allowed to happen? And where is the owner? At the time, I didn't know Chris. So I was like, where is the owner now? What's he doing now? You know, and all that was answered in the documentary. And it's
Well,
a case study.
let me just interrupt you here. That was also, in fact, I think, a very powerful way to start this whole documentary, because you really give this theme, you gave it a profound human face.
Alles wat om die hele reistrek te behartig was daar. En die mense is besig om hulle af te brand. Hulle het een van my waterlorries afgebrand, een van die trekkers afgebrand, al my quadbikes wat daar was is afgebrand. VIP losies, community halls, gone, toilets, gone. Kom ons praat hier daaroor. Jy weet, never wat die plek wat ek verloor het, ons ek weg van my lewe. Dit was scary. Mense besef nie wat ons deurgemaak het.
And it was important to tell a story. It actually, funny enough, Chris was the last interview that I did for the documentary. It took a few months to. He's a very busy man, and he's going back and forth from Namibia to South Africa a lot. I'm not sure why, but yeah, so it was very difficult to pin him down and get his story. But luckily, he really wanted to tell a story, so we finally got a date down and made it happen. But yeah, the racetrack is, I like to think of it as like how can I say, like a case study for land grabs in general, because at the end of the day, it's the PI Act that is really causing the big problem, and it is the reason for most of the land grabs. I'm sure there are other stories to be told, which I hopefully will have a chance to tell at some point, because there are other areas that I want to look into and do an even deeper dive. But the PI Act is definitely the big bad guy in the story.
I want to get into this whole theme of land grabs, and I want to get into the PI Act specifically as well. But before that, I want to just talk about this documentary, and I want to talk a little bit about you yourself. So let's kick off with that. This is your first full documentary, if I understand it correctly.
100% correct.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I imagine why the theme, why the format is a question. How I have friends here in Amsterdam that are big documentary makers, and it's a massive amount of work, and it takes broad skills. It's not just something that you pull out of your hat. So tell me how to, and why I'm asking this question is partially because you're also a comedian. So just tell me a little bit about the process itself. How did you put this together? Because it's quite big. How did you put this together?
Well, I got to admit, there was a few points where I thought I bit off more than I could chew. First, I started with the research. Is there a story here? Is there do this? Like I said, where's Chris now? Is he alive? Is he not alive? I had no idea where he was on the planet, even in South Africa. So I did a lot of research before actually starting to film or starting to even think of a story to tell and all that stuff. And then from there, which, by the way, I did have help with the research by a guy named Clay Wilson. He helped me a lot to find Chris and reach out to him and stuff like that. So big shout out to him. And then once we got Chris's interest, that's when I dug deeper, and I started to speak to some legal experts like Mark Oppenheimer and Martin van Staden from the Free Market Foundation. And they are the ones actually that pointed me in the direction of the PI Act. Now, there's another act as well that's a problem called the ESTA Act, ESTA, but I'll probably leave that for the next documentary that I do. But the PI Act is really the big kahuna. It's the real big problem. And they pointed me in that direction. They said, listen, I can tell you now, Mark, for example, he didn't know about the racetrack. He didn't know about that story because he stays in Joburg. But he said, like, any land grab or any like squatter camp or informal settlement that you see in South Africa, the PI Act is to blame.
Yeah.
So when I read the PI Act and I got to know it a little bit better, I got Mark on the documentary, and then from there, it was starting to shape a story. I then decided, okay, the PI Act is a huge problem. Definitely need to tell that story. But what about solutions? Did a bit of research about that. Found out the DA was working on a solution. Found out the referendum party is working on a solution. Included that, and then finally, I was able to interview Chris and his friend Gary, Gary is an encyclopedia of the motor industry in South Africa. I might release extra clips from the interview I had with him, because he knows the history very well, and it's fascinating stuff. So Gary brought what the community lost, which I felt was a very important thing to mention in the documentary, because we think about how terrible the land grabs are and stuff like that, but we don't really understand how, at least with the Tygerberg Raceway, how that really affected the community and an industry, and Gary kind of brings that together, while Chris talks to his own personal experience of going through that fight and going through the emotions of trying to protect his property, because he built everything himself and made the raceway into what it was at the time. So he's fighting to save it, and that comes across very well in the documentary. So yeah, the process, once I got all the interviews down, then it's just post-production editing, and a lot of research into B-roll, finding footage online. I tried to use footage, well, I did. All the footage was publicly available. And yeah, just a lot of hours in the editing room. Very, very long time in the editing room. I think if you were to ask me how long did it take me to edit, if I had the chance of focusing on editing like a full day's worth, so 8-hour day, I would say it took about 2.5 weeks to edit the entire thing. But obviously for me, I have also a job in the day, so I had to split the time, do some late nights.
I'm going to direct our discussion a little bit. I want to talk about the PI Act, obviously. When I ask you to explain what that is, I want to talk about land grabs, but I'm also fascinated about the fact that you are a South African American, or an American South African. I'm not quite sure how to put that. I didn't do much research, but I read somewhere that you born Texas, South African mother, I guess an American father. Tell us a little bit about you yourself first. I think you also lived in Cairo for some time, and then...
Yes, I was born in Texas. I lived there for 8 years. I moved to Egypt for a while, lived there for 9 years, and then I moved to South Africa. So I've been here since 2007. And my parents are a mix of a lot of things. My dad's American, Egyptian, Lebanese, French. My mom is Greek, French, Egyptian, South African. So yeah, that's my mom. I got the citizenship through her because she's South African. Yeah, I've been here since 2007, loving it. I love the country. I really do. I think South Africa and Cape Town specifically is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been to. And I just don't like the government. I really have a strong disdain for the ANC, and it hurts me and it worries me that a lot of South Africans don't see the evilness that the ANC has done or is. And I hope that this documentary will be a warning to a lot of South Africans to open their eyes and see that, for the longest time, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, they'll never sign the Expropriation Act. That's never going to happen." And then they did. And now with the PI Act, that Expropriation Act is very, very, very dangerous. But the PI Act itself is also dangerous.
Yeah, yeah. Joe, I've often found, and I've said this, and many South Africans wouldn't like me saying it, but I've often found that foreigners make better documentaries about South Africa than South Africans themselves. If you go and look at the international festivals and you go and look at some of the really very, very big and powerfully good documentaries about South Africa, you often find that they're made by either Americans or they're made by Europeans, etc. So that's why I'm asking a little bit about your background, because I imagine that not growing up in South Africa, growing up partially in the United States, partially in North Africa, etc., gives you another kind of a perspective, and you perhaps might be able to see things. You referred a little bit to it now. You see things that South Africans themselves don't see sometimes. Am I right in this assumption?
No, yeah, 100% correct. And I mean, like, one thing that people always ask me is like, why are you in South Africa and not in America? It's I didn't come here necessarily by choice. I was 18 when I came here, and my parents were divorced, and I didn't like Egypt, so I decided to move here with my mom. In Egypt, I was hectically bullied, especially after 9/11. Egyptians or Arabs didn't really like Americans that much. So I grew a bit of a disdain for Egypt, and I got into politics, ironically. When I say that, I mean I just researched a lot about why Egyptians hate the U.S. and I read up history and all that stuff. And then when I came to South Africa, I actually didn't want to get into politics. I didn't want to know anything about it. So I just like, I want to do skateboarding and I want to do other things and focus on my matric and focus on this and do acting and do this and do that.
That was you were about 16 years old when you arrived in South?
18. Yeah, turning 19.
Okay.
Finished my matric here, did college here, all just ignoring politics and enjoying the new life and the nice people and all that stuff, not realizing the damage that's going to, because like, again, people used to ask me, why are you here? Even then, why are you here? Why are you here? Oh, the government's messed up. Oh, this and that. And because I wasn't really into politics at the time, I didn't really pay much attention to it. I was like, well, it's a nice country to me. I'm happy. Only when I later on in life, when I think it was load shedding was really bad here, and it was affecting my my business. Did I start to really get back into politics? Because it's like, okay, why the hell is load shedding happening? Why is this happening?
Yeah.
And looking into it and seeing the corruption and being like, okay, so the ANC isn't this rainbow airy fairy, we're gonna bring on this amazing country that's going to be prosperous and for everybody. No, they're actually liars and deceitful, and they've caused a lot of South Africans a lot of suffering. And that's why that's the main reason why I kind of took off the rose-tinted goggles that I once had and was like, no.
Yeah.
There was a time when it was taboo to kind of criticize the ANC, and now it's not. And I'm glad about that, because finally South Africans are opening their eyes, but I think a lot more South Africans need to open their eyes.
Yeah, yeah. I'm asking you these questions obviously also because you're running a South African news channel.
Yes.
I saw your interview with Davy Root a day or two ago.
So great.
So now that your focus area is South Africa, South African politics, etc., and I'm trying to figure out for myself. I'm asking that question that many South Africans are asking you back at home as well: is the Americans have just given refugee ship to the Afrikaners. Why would an American want to go? And seeing the impression that I'm getting, passionately want to be a South African, and I'm also getting the impression of somebody who's in fact become, in the meantime, a passionate South African.
Yeah. Look, I have a joke in my stand-up where I open up the show sometimes and I say, hey guys, I'm from the States, I'm from Texas. Usually, sometimes depending on the crowd, we'll get a cheer or won't get a cheer. And then I'm like, hey guys, things are really bad in the US when we're coming here for citizenship. So there's a light joke about that, and some of it I wouldn't say is true, but you know, from my point of view, I came here again. You know, I didn't really have much of a choice, but I chose to come here because I didn't want to stay in Egypt. And when I came here, I fell in love with this country. There was plans for me to go to the States. Once I moved here with my mom, I was supposed to go to the U.S. Coast Guard, but that fell through. And I'm glad it did, because I've met my lovely wife, who I cannot imagine a life without her. She's South African. She's half Afrikaans, half English. We have two beautiful kids. Yeah. We have two beautiful kids who, again, I can't imagine my life without them.
Yeah.
My home is here. My home is here. And I care so much about this country because, again, it is a beautiful country. The people are amazing. Everything about this country, the culture, no matter where you come from, no matter what creed you are, no matter what ethnic group you're part of, no matter what tribe you come from, I think each tribe has a unique story to tell and unique culture characteristics about them that make them so interesting. And I think all of us deserve to be in this country. However, I think the government is what's sowing division. I mean, I go out every day and I don't see black on white fighting. That doesn't exist. Okay. As much as the media in this country and the ANC want you to believe that, you know, the whites hate blacks or the blacks hate whites, it's definitely not true. And the reason why I do the YouTube channel, the reason why I do these documentaries, is for my kids, it's for my family, it's for me, and it's for South Africans, because the truth needs to start getting told. The truth needs to start getting out there. And we need to stop getting angry with each other, which is what the ANC is so good at making us do, and start actually getting angry with the actual problem, which is the ANC.
What did you know about South Africa when you arrived there as an 18-year-old boy? What was your view or your vision of South Africa at that point in your life?
I had visited South Africa very briefly the year before, in 2006. I visited some family. So I had a very good positive outlook on South Africa from that experience. But also, funny enough, in the final year before I left Egypt, I had to do a geography assignment. And the country I was given was South Africa. So I knew a lot about, you know, the South African resources, the government, all that stuff. But in the history books and in the books, you know, the ANC is painted as a liberation movement that saved the black majority, and they're all good and everything's hunky dory.
My question really, Joe, is did you believe that when you arrived in South Africa?
Yes.
You believed in that. That was the picture that you had. That's a picture you believed. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I still like to think that Nelson Mandela had good intentions. I think he did, even though I do agree that he was a terrorist. But still, I mean, one man's terrorist is another man's liberation leader. So regardless of that, though, I do think that at the beginning, the ANC was trying. And the reason why I think that is because I think it was in 96-ish, somewhere there, when Thabo Mbeki was president, we had a very good GDP. The unemployment was the lowest it's ever been. You know, I think it was like 20% or something. You know, that's not apartheid legacy. That's the ANC doing their job, right? Making it a prosperous country. And then once Zuma came in, it just all went to crap. So, yeah, there was a short time in history where the ANC looked like it was doing what it promised it was going to do, and then.
Do you still today believe in the multicultural, multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy, in what many from here would call the South African experiment?
No. I say this not easily. I don't. Let me put it this way. I think it can work, because the majority of people, again, no matter what background they're from, all they want to do is work, and they want to provide for their family, and they want to live a good life and be able to afford things, and be able to go to a good school and get a good job and afford health insurance or afford whatever. Unfortunately, we don't live in that situation right now. We live in a country where the majority are poor. Nearly half the country's on social grants. And there's a huge hatred being sowed by the ANC. And in our current situation, as South Africa as it is right now, I don't think the experiment is working, and I don't believe that it will work under these conditions. But if we have a government that puts the people first rather than its party first, I think then we can see that rainbow nation that was once promised. But until then, until the leaders of this country stop thinking with their own pockets and greed, the South African people will suffer. And for as long as the South African people are suffering, there is no rainbow nation.
Yeah, my impression is that you're also saying to me, but there is goodwill amongst the people of South Africa.
Yes.
That there is no really racial tension between black and white or pink and purple and all the rest of it, that amongst the people, there's a goodwill to make this work. But what stands in the way of the success of this multicultural democracy is, in fact, the African national government as government. That's what you're saying.
100%. Yeah, and you can see it with the refugees, right? So when Trump offered that refugee status for some Afrikaners, a lot of Afrikaners were like, "No, we're going to stay home and we're going to try and fix the problem here." And I mean, I don't criticize anyone that left. I completely 100% understand. Trust me, if I have no gripe with anyone who's left. You want to leave, that's fine. Some of my friends are leaving. And that's fine. It's your choice. I don't say that's a bad thing. I don't say it's a good thing. I'm just like, it's your choice. You have a right to choose. But what I will say is that there are people in this country that want to make it work, that want to try and save South Africa, and I'm one of them. I mean, I'm not going to say that if shit hits the fan, I'm not going to leave. But I don't know. Shit hasn't hit the fan yet, so I can't tell you. But for now, I'm going to keep on fighting for this country. I'm going to keep on exposing the truth. And I'm going to keep showing people that what the mainstream media says and what ANC says is not true. We are a very resilient country. South Africa has had a very intense, hard, difficult past. No one is saying forget about it. But we do have to get to a point where we're like, okay, guys, what we're doing now is clearly not working. So how do we fix it?
What are you really now? Are you an American who's becoming a South African? Because you very profoundly talk about we. And I mean, I love it.
Yes.
I love the fact that you embrace the country. I love the fact that you identify as we, part of us. I also identify of that we.
Yeah.
But I guess you still have your American passport. Or is that too cynical of me to ask?
No. I do. I have the American passport and the South African passport, and I like to call myself African American.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding.
Okay, African American. Well, okay.
I'm just being a bit, toying a bit.
Do you think it's handy to be a comedian to survive South Africa?
Yeah, South Africans have a great sense of humor. Let me tell you, anytime there's a crisis, someone's going to find the funny in it, which is great. I love it. But I mean, like you see a lot of South Africans say this, like you have to laugh because if you don't, you're going to cry. Yeah. So I identify. I don't even like using that word. I consider myself me, man. Like I'm South African, I'm American. I love this country. I love USA too. Not extremely happy with what's going on over there, but it's still a home to me. South Africa is also my home, but America. Anybody that I'm sure even for you, Johan, you born in South Africa, you live in Amsterdam now, but I'm sure that you still yearn for that home, if you know what I'm talking about.
A question: what are the particular, if you can think of some qualities or characteristics about South Africa that you find so attractive that makes you want to identify with the country as much as you obviously do?
What I like most about South Africa is it's really hard to pinpoint one thing because I have so many things. Like again, like in Cape Town, there's so many things to do.
Yeah.
I can go wine tasting. I can go climb Table Mountain. I can go to a movie theater. I can do so much. I can go to the beach. I can go to a park, and just be at awe. Like if you drive down the garden route, be at awe about the landscape that exists. And I'm always like telling my wife, "This is so beautiful." I love my wife. You know, like she's South African. That's one of the greatest reasons to love South Africa. And she's she always teaches me new things about South Africa, which I deeply appreciate.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, the people, and I think this is something I want to really touch on. One thing that I've noticed about South Africans, and again, doesn't matter where they come from, very welcoming, friendly people. That to me was something that struck me when I first got here, is how friendly people are in this country. Yeah. And that's what made me fall in love with it as well.
Protest action coupled with illegal land occupations have been continuing in the area for weeks.
The attack on the Tygerberg Raceway was probably the most violent.
We've seen in the past couple of years an increase in land invasions, unlawful occupations.
Hordes and hordes of angry protesters.
The land invaders attacked one of our staff members with a petrol bomb.
All spheres of government, and especially the ruling parties, is involved in this.
Of course, the situation with regards to land, illegal land occupations have been ongoing in areas such as Kraaifontein.
Complete racetrack is gone in a week.
I came across the term, I think the term is used in your documentary as well, shack farming. Tell me about shack farming. Tell me about these land grabs.
Yeah, shack farming is quite an interesting one. I didn't know about it until I interviewed JP Smith, who told me about it. So basically, when a plot of land is being, so let me start from here. There are mafiosos kind of syndicates, right? And when they somehow find out about a plot of land, whether it be a nature reserve or maybe it was earmarked for housing, or maybe they think nothing is going on with the land, doesn't matter. Point is, they see a plot of land and they say, let's invade it. Before they do that, they start kind of marketing to the people, hey, we're going to invade this land. So there's always someone that gets them hyped up. We're going to invade this land because you're never going to get land and blah, blah, blah. And then you also have these other syndicates who, once the land is invaded, they go to the people and they're like, okay, we're gonna give you this little plot of land for 5,000 rand, sometimes 15,000 rand, and you're gonna pay us off monthly like a rent. And they just continue to just churn out the shacks as much as possible. I mean, this didn't make it into the documentary, but I might have it as a separate clip, where JP was explaining to me that there'd be an area that they would want to invade, and meters down the road, there'd be a house where they're basically mass producing shacks. And they'd put a shack on a bucky, drive the bucky out to where they wanted to put the shack, lift it off the bucky, plonk it there. There's your shack, ready to go, ready for someone to move in. And it's done like quickly. So it's like a mass production type of vibe. And that's why they call it shack farming. Yeah. But it's all to make money. So these mafiosos and syndicates can make money off of these people who don't understand that the land that they are occupying isn't actually theirs. But they're told that it is because they've paid for it now. So yeah, it's sheer profiteering. I mean, if you look at just the racetrack alone, there's at least 2,000 shacks, if not more. That's like a very conservative estimate. So imagine you sold 2,000 shacks for 5,000 rand or 10,000 rand. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of freaking money. And then you're constantly making more money because then the rent gets extended or what have you, or you add in more shacks or what have you. So yeah, it's a very lucrative business for these individuals, and they're not shy about it. You can Google shack farming, you'll find some articles that talk about it.
But that sounds like big organizations then, criminal organizations, but big organizations to be able to do that. Help me understand how it works in terms of the PI Act. I get the impression, and it's what I got from the documentary as well, is once the shack is planted and you've got some, I would imagine, furnishing, you refer to a bed or a table or whatever the case might be, somebody's actually occupying that. At what point does the PI Act begin to protect this illegal occupant? What happens physically before you can say, this is where I live, I'm now the occupant, you have to take me to court to get rid of me?
Yes. So in order to understand that, first we need to also mention that the PI Act, for those of you who do not know, it's the Prevention of Illegal Eviction from and Unlawful Occupation of Land Act. That's a bit of an oxymoron already.
Yeah.
But this act, which came into effect in 1998, was meant to prevent in a situation where, for example, you're renting your place out to me, I decide not to pay, you're not allowed to just throw me out. You have to then go through court, and we go through a process, and then you can legally kick me out once the courts have looked at both our stories and said, okay, Joe, you're there illegally now, you need to move on, blah, blah, blah. Johan needs his place back, blah, blah. That was one of the reasons. The other reason was because of the apartheid era laws that allowed for basically you to be kicked out without any defense, and you could be kicked off on the streets. Women and children were off on the streets. Also, you were just left to fend for yourself. So that's why this act was created and passed through. It was, as always, it's always with, good intentions. But as Robert King says, the path to hell is paved with good intentions. But what the problem is with this act is that it's very vague, very skinny. It's only a few pages, very skinny definitions. The definition of a home, for example, isn't clearly defined in the PI Act, which is one of the major issues with the PI Act, because the courts have kind of defined it through, legal cases and stuff like that. But as JP mentions in the documentary, that even something as simple as a plastic tarp going over your head is deemed a home.
Yeah.
So if someone literally, Johan, if you were living in South Africa right now and someone jumps over your fence, sets up a tent and, has a suitcase and a makeshift bed and sits in there, you're not allowed to kick them out. You're not allowed to take down the tent. You're not allowed to kick them off. You have to go through the courts. The only way that you can kick them off is before he sets up the tent. So let's say he just manages to, do this with the tent. You come, you grab the tent, you're like, no, you throw it over. Before it is erected, before it is made, before anything can be put into the tent, that is when you must intervene. It's an immediate intervention. If it's set up, then too bad.
And is that Joe? That's then in fact what these criminal organizations are doing. The idea is you've identified a piece of land. I got from the documentary that sometimes these syndicates are actually even functioning within municipalities or operating there, getting information about there's a space of land that's going to be developed or whatever the case might be. So it actually has that access to information. But the act itself is really literally as quick as possible putting down that shack there and trying to get somebody or some furnishing into it to say this is a home to meet the requirements for it to be called legally a home. And as soon as you've established that, you are part of a process and you can't just simply evict people. So it's
just like
put it down to start, to get people into their houses and to
Yes.
force the legal situation then.
You have to get a sheriff involved, and the sheriff will then go to each of the shacks. He'll look inside, and if he sees a bed or a suitcase or whatever, anything that's evidence that someone's living there, even if there's no one inside of it, just a bed and a suitcase, then the sheriff will say, it's occupied, can't take it down. That one's not occupied, you can take it down. And what JP was saying is that sometimes, they would investigate these shacks, and then they would see that the one bed was made on 2 milk crates, and the middle wasn't supported at all. The moment you pressed on it, it collapsed. The suitcases were empty. So it was all just to make as if there was somebody living there. And even the grass hadn't been cut inside. The grass was still 30 centimeters tall. So there was no indication that somebody was living there. But again, or no physical evidence of someone living there. But a bed and an empty suitcase apparently is proof that somebody lives there. And the mafiosos, they know this. They know how to twist the law. They know the loopholes. That's how they manage to keep the shacks up there.
Yeah. Do we know whether political parties are also involved here, or politicians play a role here? We've heard stories about councillors selling houses to people. There's all sort of stories going around about that as well. I'm trying to get an idea of who's behind all of this. I know we talk about the mafiosis that are involved here, but are there also political actors at play here?
When we say to the people of South Africa, occupy the land, we don't say do an illegal thing. It is a right thing to do because it is your land. How do you say we are wrong by asking people to go and occupy what is rightfully belonging to them? It is your property. I can't say to you, go and occupy your house, and I'm told I'm doing a wrong thing. The land belongs to you.
The economic freedom fighters, for one, it's not unheard of. And just the other day, one of them was shouting, when you see unoccupied land, occupy it. It's in the documentary when he says that. It's been widely covered and reported that the EFF calls for land invasions or incites land invasions. So the EFF is definitely one of them. JP mentions the Colored Congress party, but there are others, MK as well, that often call for that. As far as the EFF, I think, is the only one that you can really say and see evidence of them, during election time, really calling and telling people. I mean, there was 2 stories I remember where they're standing at the land and they're saying, guys, come invade the land, and they've measured out plots and stuff like that. So that's like that there, right in front of you. It's happening. As for the others, more to get specific about who and stuff, that's difficult to uncover. Whether anyone else, like a counselor or whatever, because they do hide their tracks very well. And I also have to be careful, because if I start poking the bear a bit too closely, I myself might be in trouble. But there's definitely signs. It's easy to see when you start piecing everything together. Like it's not hard to make that assumption that the city or not the city, but some officials in the city, in municipalities, are involved, that they somehow help. Whether it be, it could be as simple as, I'm a city official, a gangster comes up to me and says, hey, I see this plot of land is earmarked for housing. I want to do a land invasion on it. I'm going to give you R1 million to shut up and not say anything.
Yeah.
And then I just like, okay. And I take my R1 million and I don't say anything and let it happen and all that stuff. There's probably, I'm speculating, but that's probably how involved the city can be or individuals can be.
Yeah.
There's many ways that this corruption takes place.
Yeah.
So yeah.
The PI Act obviously favors the occupier. There's no doubt about it. I'm not a legal expert, so I can't read it from a legal standpoint. But what I understand it is, and if I'm to read it here, prevention The PI Act is the Prevention of Illegal Eviction from an Unlawful Occupation. That is, in fact, really quite an oxymoron if you read it like that. I tried to did a little bit of research and tried to find out how many of these invasions are actually successful. And this is what I came across. I'll share this with you. In 2023, there were roughly 7,500 evictions. Let me say that again. In 2023, there were roughly 7,500 eviction applications filed in South African courts related to unlawful land occupation. Approximately 65% of these, that's around 4,875 cases, involved privately owned land, homes or farms. Of all eviction applications, about 58% resulted in successful eviction orders. 58%. That means that approximately 2,830 successful evictions were carried out. Successful evictions were carried out, leaving about 2,050 cases that were not solved. In other words, were not turned around. That means, in fact, 2,050 cases of successful land grabbing. What do we do about this?
Yeah, well, this is the problem with the PI Act. So, you know, there's 2,000 odd that were successful, probably had a lot of money behind them. And your average South African doesn't. You know, if someone takes over your land and then you've got to now go to courts, it's a very lengthy process and it's very expensive too. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't have money to spend years in the court system trying to get an eviction. And that's the big problem with the PI Act. It forces the landowner to take a route that will devastate his property the longer that it takes to get his property back. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, that's exactly what's happening. You see it also with the racetrack. What happened there specifically was, okay, first of all, it was during lockdown. And a lot of the stats you read earlier were during lockdown. And JP also mentions that during lockdown, there was as much as 12 land invasions happening at once, especially in July period. And what was happening during lockdown was the courts were not doing or not filing eviction notices. And they had put a hold on eviction notices. But the city did try to get what they call an interdict. So basically trying to okay, we know that you are not filing, but we have a big problem here. Yeah. We need to get these people off the land. So we need that interdict. But then guess who stepped in to stop that interdict? The South African Human Rights Commission, who, bleeding hearts, oh, but where are these people going to go? And they need a place to stay. And, the law at the moment in COVID says that you're not allowed to give evictions. And unfortunately, the South African Human Rights Commission won, which meant that the police had to stop trying to evict the land invaders of the raceway. And the city only got that ruling overturned 12 months later. And of course, by that time, the racetrack was gone. And, if you can use that as an example for anyone. If you have to wait 12 years to get a ruling on eviction, your land's going to be gone.
Yeah. So the PI Act is a fact. Are there any political parties or organizations that are fighting this act or trying to get changes to the law?
Yes, so the Democratic Alliance has submitted amendments to the PI Act. The documentary goes into a little bit detail about what they want to change, but fundamentally they want to define what a home is. And they also want to make incitement to land grabs. So anybody who incites land grabs, they get arrested for at least 3 years. Because I think at the moment it's not a criminal act to incite. I could stand to be corrected on that. But the act of invading is illegal, but inciting it, not so much. And then there's the Referendum Party, who they are more focused on the Western Cape. So they want to change the bylaws in the Western Cape and the housing policies in the Western Cape to basically take away the PI Act completely and replace it with a new act or bill that will give clear definitions on what a home is, tell basically the courts to handle each situation on a case-by-case basis, because there are situations where the vulnerable are or do need help, like a single mom and a child or what have you. And in that case, then you would be required to offer alternative accommodation in the meantime until you can get the matter resolved. So, for example, like someone, let's say you had a mother and a child who no longer could afford to pay you rent, and instead of just kicking them out, you offer them alternative accommodation so that you can get other people into your house to start paying your rent. But also the referendum party wants to put a limit on the accommodation thing. So, for example, only for 6 months until that person can get onto their own 2 feet or whatever. So there's that. And basically make it completely illegal if you set up a tent or a dwelling or whatever on somebody's property without permission.
Mhm.
And the DA also wants to make that more that amendment as well. So those unfortunately the DA, I think from a national point of view, and I agree with Robert on this, and they're fighting it on a national level, which will be a lot tougher to push through. Whereas with the referendum party, with their bill, the DA already holds the majority in the Western Cape in the provincial government, and it's going to be very difficult for the DA to explain to the public why they're not going to do this. So I think that there's a greater success opportunity for that bill to go through, at least in the Western Cape. But it does need to be fixed across South Africa. So I do encourage the DA, obviously, to keep trying.
Yeah.
And hopefully people are more aware of this now. So when they see, the DA is pushing this through, they'll sign petitions or they'll sign public comment, and hopefully it happens.
Yeah, it's maybe a little bit.
But
I beg your pardon.
One thing to mention with the DA. So their amendments were accepted because they had a hearing, a committee hearing on the 28th of May, and the committee said that they would review the amendments, but they will come back with their own amendments in March 2026, which I found very interesting because that's right before the not the national elections, but the municipal elections.
No. But as we all know, these are very slow processes. It takes many, many, many years before we pass law in any country, for that matter. It's not a question. Last statement. Maybe your reaction is, as it is right now. If I am the owner of a small holding or whatever the case might be, and I go on holiday for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, and I come back from holiday, and I find a number of people have moved onto my land, put their shacks up there, there is in fact legally nothing that I can do.
No, there is something you can do. You can go to the courts. That's what the law says. The law says you have to go to the courts. You cannot.
That's more or less what I mean with nothing.
Yeah. So like, if you come back and your small holding is taken, you're not allowed to remove anyone. You're not allowed to remove anything that they own. Because even when the city tried to do it, and with some of these shacks, and then they go to court, and then the court says, "Oh, but you removed it unlawfully." It's an oxymoron again. The city was forced to rebuild the shack and reimburse them, like give them money for the damages. So you really are forced to go through the legal route, and that legal route could take years if you even have the money to fight it. But yes, that would be your situation.
Last question, Joe. I don't know if you've done this research or not. Maybe you know, maybe you don't. The South African laws, if you have to compare them to other countries, like the USA, for example, would the South African laws stand out for its, let's call it, liberal nature?
Yeah, I don't know a lot about the American law because, I focus mainly on the South African stuff. I've been told by some people in the comment section that the same thing's happening in the States. I would like to look into that. One thing I will say is, just on the topic of land and maybe expropriation, there's this interesting narrative that's happening in South Africa at the moment, where a lot of people are saying, oh, there's no reason to worry about the Expropriation Act because the US also has the expropriation. They also do expropriation, eminent domain. But the biggest thing that people either don't know or don't want to talk about is that eminent domain and the Expropriation Act that exists currently in South Africa is not the same. Yes, it is true that every country expropriates, 100% correct. But the biggest difference between the Expropriation Act here in South Africa and the rest of the world, well, maybe not the rest of the world, but America specifically, is that the Expropriation Act right now in South Africa gives a few reasons. Well, firstly, allows for expropriation with nil compensation, and there's semantics around that, but nil compensation means zero. And then it gives a few reasons as to when the government could expropriate without compensation. But just before it gives those reasons, it says, but not limited to. So if the government decided, oh, well, we're going to come up with this new excuse, we're going to take this land for no compensation because it's inhumane or whatever, they can do that. I'm not saying they will, but I'm saying they can.
Yeah.
And they use vague terms like public interest, which if you look at the act, it's right there, it's all in the act. If you look at the definition of public interest, it's basically about land reform, where the government can basically expropriate land based on demographics, and if it deems that, oh, this white farmer no longer needs the land, we're going to give it to this black farmer. They can do that.
Yeah.
And why am I mentioning all this is because eminent domain in the US, eminent domain is not allowed to give nil compensation. It's in the Bill of Rights that when the government expropriates land in the US, they have to give compensation. Yeah. There's no two ways about that. It is there. People can find it. Google it. It's very easy to find.
It's in the law.
It's in the Bill of Rights. Yeah, it's in the law. And that is why when people say, oh, but America has eminent domain, haven't you heard of it? No, it's not the same thing, because the Expropriation Act allows the government to take things for free. And in the American government, they're not allowed to do that. That is the biggest difference. And that's what I will say about in terms of the difference between laws in South Africa and in America. And I think it's an important one to know. In terms of squatter rights in America, I still have to do research on that one.
Yeah. Very, very last question. There seems to be a South Africa post-Donald Trump Ramaphosa Oval Office. There seems to be more heat in the country. That's the impression that I'm getting. Do you find that parallel to that, as we grow closer and closer to election time, for example, that you have more of these kind of land grabs and land invasions happening?
Yeah, there's definitely a spike in land invasions or land invasion attempts when election time happens, because as JP mentions in the documentary, a lot of the politicians try and gain favor from the public. Like they'll say things like, oh, if you vote for us or if you vote for me, we'll give you land or whatever. So there's definitely a spike around election time. I think for the most part, the DA has been good at forfeiting the attempts, but there's definitely land grabs happening across South Africa very easily. A few months ago, just after the Expropriation Act was signed, there was a farm that was invaded in Limpopo. There was another farm in East London that was invaded as well. So land invasions are happening. And I want to make something very clear. As much as the ANC and Cyril Ramaphosa will sit in the Oval Office and say land invasions are not happening, they're playing semantics. Because what you'll often hear them say is the government is not seizing land. And that's true. The government isn't going to farms or public places or dwellings or empty plots of land and taking the masses and saying, here, take the land, which is something my documentary makes also very clear. But what they are doing is giving other people permission to do it through the PI Act. That is what is happening. Slowly, silently, calculated. And if we don't stop it, if we don't do something about it, we will be in another Zimbabwe situation.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what is being allowed, because the government also turns a blind eye towards it.
Joe Emilio, thank you very much for this discussion. Once again, congratulations. It's a fantastic documentary. We'll put on the bottom of the screen here where people can, but it's open to the public.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Fantastic.
And
We'll put it on the screen
if anybody wants to support the next one, just go to the website as well, stolenground.co.za.
I was going to ask you, do you have any new projects in the pipeline?
Yes, I would love to do another one, but like I said earlier, it was easy to, or let me put it this way, simple. It was simple enough for me to do this on my own. I had a little bit of help from people here and there, but for the most part, I would say 95% of it was on my own. And I was able to invest and I didn't have a sponsor. I didn't have anyone giving me money to do this. I invested my time and my efforts into it, but I don't think I can do it again. I sacrificed a lot of time with my lovely wife and family to do this, and a lot of my own time as well. I would love to do it for free, but I just can't. So if people want to see another one, go to the stolenground.co.za. All the information is there on how you can help me make the next one. Trust me, there's a lot more stories to tell, and I have many ideas as to how to tell the stories and captivate the audience even more. There's definitely more exciting and somewhat heartbreaking and eye-opening stories to tell when it comes to land grabs.
Joe, I have a feeling that everybody around you, I think South Africa is very happy to have you as another South African.
I hope so.
Thank you very, very much for the chat. Please go and watch Stolen Land. Thank you so much, Joe. Hope to talk to you again.
Thank you, Johan. Thank you, Johan. It was a pleasure. Thank you.